Jeffrey Epstein was a wealthy American financier, convicted sex offender, and alleged sex trafficker whose life and death became one of the most controversial and high-profile scandals of the 21st century. Known for his connections to powerful figures across politics, academia, and international business, Epstein's carefully curated image as a mysterious billionaire unraveled to reveal a dark and far-reaching network of sexual abuse and exploitation. Epstein was born in Brooklyn, New York, to a working-class family. He showed academic promise and briefly attended Cooper Union and New York University, though he never completed a degree. Despite this, he began teaching at the Dalton School, an elite Manhattan prep school, where he made early connections to influential families. He later transitioned into finance, joining Bear Stearns in the 1970s and quickly rising through the ranks due to his charm, intelligence, and ability to win over clients. In the 1980s, Epstein founded his own investment firm, J. Epstein and Company, purportedly managing the wealth of billionaires and offering specialized financial services for the ultra-rich. Despite the vague and secretive nature of his business dealings, Epstein amassed a substantial fortune, acquiring a portfolio of luxury properties around the world, including a private island in the US Virgin Islands, a Manhattan mansion, and a sprawling ranch in New Mexico. In the early 2000s, suspicions began to mount about Epstein's behavior, particularly regarding his relationships with young women and underage girls. In 2005, police in Palm Beach, Florida, launched an investigation after the parents of a 14-year-old girl alleged that Epstein had paid her for sex. A deeper investigation uncovered a pattern of abuse involving dozens of underage girls, many of whom were recruited under the pretense of providing massages and were then sexually exploited. Despite the scale of the evidence, Epstein secured a secretive and highly controversial plea deal in 2008 with then US Attorney Alexander Acosta. He pleaded guilty to 2 lesser state charges, soliciting prostitution and soliciting a minor for prostitution, and served only 13 months in a county jail, where he was granted generous work release privileges. The deal also granted immunity to potential co-conspirators and effectively shut down the federal investigation. Public outrage over the plea deal simmered for years, but it wasn't until investigative journalism, most notably by the Miami Herald in 2018, that Epstein's case regained national attention. The reporting revealed the depth of Epstein's alleged crimes and the number of victims involved, reigniting demands for justice and accountability. On July 6, 2019, Epstein was arrested again, this time on federal charges of sex trafficking minors in New York. Prosecutors accused him of operating a vast network of abuse, luring underage girls to his homes and paying them for sex, while also enlisting them to recruit other victims. Authorities found a cache of incriminating materials during a raid of his Manhattan townhouse. The case promised to expose a web of enablers and high-profile associates, many of whom had socialized or traveled with Epstein over the years, including former President Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew of the British royal family, and future President Donald Trump. Questions swirled around whether these figures were involved in or aware of Epstein's criminal activities. On August 10, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York. His death was officially ruled a suicide by hanging, but the circumstances, including broken surveillance cameras and sleeping guards, sparked widespread conspiracy theories and public mistrust. Following his death, prosecutors continued investigating his inner circle. Ghislaine Maxwell, a British socialite and longtime associate of Epstein, was arrested in 2020 and later convicted in 2021 on multiple counts of sex trafficking and conspiracy. Her conviction further substantiated claims that Epstein operated an organised and predatory network, often relying on women like Maxwell to groom and manipulate his victims. To this day, many questions remain unanswered. How exactly did Epstein make his fortune? Who else was involved in his crimes? Why was he allowed to evade serious consequences for so long? His life and crimes continued to be the subject of books, documentaries, lawsuits, and investigations. For many, Epstein's story is not just about one man, but about the broader structures of power and secrecy among the elite that allowed his abuse to persist for decades. In this video, we look at the weeks and hours leading up to his death. On July 6, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested on federal sex trafficking charges at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey upon his return from Paris. After questioning, he was transported to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York, where he was placed in the general inmate population. On arrival, he was said to be distraught, sad, and a little confused, as well as dazed and withdrawn. And a prison official was concerned enough about his behaviour that she sent an email suggesting that a psychologist speak to him, although the request was not acted on. After spending 22 hours in the general population, Epstein was transferred to the special housing unit of the Manhattan prison. This move was prompted by the intense media attention and notoriety surrounding Epstein, which made him a target among other inmates. Inmates in the SHU are securely isolated from the general population and are typically confined to their cells for about 23 hours a day. On July 8th, Epstein appeared in court and pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. He denied having any suicidal thoughts, and a forensic psychologist determined that he did not have a mental illness. However, the psychologist recommended that Epstein be evaluated for suicide risk as a precautionary measure. As a result, he was placed under psychological observation, which involves closer monitoring but is less strict than being on suicide watch. On July 18th, the court denied bail for Epstein and ordered him to be detained until his trial. This was a significant blow to Epstein, and his mental health declined rapidly, although it went largely unnoticed. On July 23rd at 1:27 a.m, correctional officers found Jeffrey Epstein in his cell with an orange cloth around his neck. His cellmate reported that Epstein attempted to hang himself. Initially, he claimed his cellmate had tried to kill him, but later said he did not know what happened and requested to remain with his cellmate. Another inmate had heard the cellmate calling for help and stated Epstein attempted to hang himself from the bunk bed ladder. Medical staff noted friction marks and reddening on his neck and knee. His injuries were not severe enough to necessitate hospitalization, but he was placed on strict suicide watch and 24-hour psychiatric observation, and his mental state was closely monitored. However, Epstein was removed from suicide watch the next day, but remained under psychological observation until July 30th. Disciplinary charges against Epstein were not pursued due to insufficient evidence. In the aftermath of the suicide attempt, the psychology department determined that Epstein required a more suitable cellmate. In the days that followed, Epstein repeatedly complained that the toilet in his cell was continuously flushing, forcing him to sit in the corner of his cell with his hands over his ears. He reported feeling agitated and unable to sleep at night. Despite this, Epstein was removed from psychological observation and was transferred back to the special housing unit, where he was assigned a new cellmate and given the cell closest to the correction officer's desk in the common area. He continued to voice complaints about his prison environment, and sleeping issues and medical records indicated that he suffered from sleep apnea, constipation, hypertension, lower back pain, and prediabetes. On July 31st, Epstein appeared in federal court for the first time since his suicide attempt. He appeared calm and showed no signs of physical injury. During the hearing, no tentative date was set for his trial. After the court appearance, Epstein became distressed, and US Marshals reported that he exhibited suicidal tendencies. The following day, prison officials met with Epstein and conducted a suicide risk assessment. Based on this evaluation, they determined it was unnecessary to place him on suicide watch again. On August 8th, Epstein purchased $73.85 worth of items from the prison commissary, including an AM/FM radio and headphones. This was interpreted as a sign that he was trying to adapt to his jail environment. On August 9th, after meeting with his lawyers at the prison, staff allowed Epstein to make a telephone call that was neither recorded nor monitored, which violated the Bureau of Prisons policy. Although Epstein claimed he was calling his mother, he actually contacted someone with whom he allegedly had a personal relationship. On that same day, Epstein's cellmate was transferred to another facility, leaving him alone. Despite this, no actions were taken to assign him a new cellmate. Additionally, the US Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit unsealed approximately 2,000 pages of documents related to civil litigation involving Ghislaine Maxwell. The released documents contained significant derogatory information about Epstein, which garnered extensive media coverage and showed the full extent of him and Maxwell's depravity. At approximately 8 p.m. that evening, inmates in the special housing unit were locked in their cells for the night. The staff were supposed to do inmate counts and checks throughout the night, but for whatever reason, no checks were carried out after 10:40 p.m, even though count slips and round sheets had been falsified to indicate that these procedures had been followed. On August 10th, at around 6:30 a.m, two staff members, Correctional Officer Tova Noel and Material Handler Michael Thomas, began delivering breakfast to the inmates. Noel unlocked the door to Epstein's cell and Thomas attempted to deliver breakfast through the food slot. When Epstein did not respond to his verbal commands, Thomas unlocked the cell door and found Epstein hanging inside. Thomas immediately called for Noel to request help and a medical emergency. He reported that when he entered Epstein's cell, he found Epstein with an orange string, presumably from a sheet or shirt, wrapped around his neck and tied to the top of the bunk bed. Epstein was suspended from the top bunk in a near-seated position, with his buttocks approximately 1 to 1.5 inches off the floor. Thomas quickly removed the orange string from the bunk bed, causing Epstein's body to drop to the ground. He then lowered Epstein's body to the floor and began performing chest compressions until other staff members arrived about 1 minute later. Shortly after, outside medical personnel arrived to take over the emergency response and transported Epstein to a local hospital, where he was pronounced dead. A search of his cell following his death revealed that he had an excessive number of prison blankets, linens and articles of clothing, some of which had been ripped to create nooses. On August 11, 2019, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner conducted an autopsy and determined the cause of death was suicide by hanging. Blood toxicology tests indicated that there were no medications or illegal substances present in Epstein's system, and his injuries were consistent with suicide by hanging. There was no evidence of defensive wounds, which are typically found in homicide cases. Epstein did not have any marks on his hands, broken fingernails, or debris underneath them. Additionally, there were no contusions on his knuckles that would suggest a struggle. Aside from an abrasion on his arm, likely caused by convulsions from hanging, there were no bruises on his body. An investigation was launched to determine how Epstein was able to take his own life, revealing numerous serious failures by the prison staff. These failures included not assigning a new cellmate for Epstein, failing to conduct the required checks on inmates throughout the night, and neglecting to maintain the video surveillance system that was faulty on the night Epstein died. There was some footage, but it only captured the common area and parts of the stairways leading to Epstein's cell tier, but it did not include any view of his cell door. The world was shocked when the news broke that Jeffrey Epstein was dead. Jeffrey Epstein has been dead for several years, yet his ghost still looms large in the dark halls of the internet. He has become as notorious in death as he was in life, with widespread conspiracy theories and cover-ups about the real nature of his demise. The 66-year-old was known for cultivating relationships with famous friends and acquaintances. President Donald Trump, former President Bill Clinton, and Prince Andrew from the UK all had connections to him, and some of his powerful associates have been involved in the allegations against him. Numerous rumours have circulated regarding what politicians may have known about Epstein's alleged crimes, and whether some of them might have wanted him dead. Many found it suspicious that Epstein was no longer a threat, as his death removed the possibility of pursuing criminal charges against him. In fact, a judge dismissed all criminal charges on August 29, 2019. His death also ensured that his secrets died with him, eliminating any chance of him exposing his wealthy and influential friends, and it was no surprise that immediately after Epstein's death, the hashtag #EpsteinMurder trended worldwide. Social media was inundated with speculation, suggesting everything from a faked suicide to an orchestrated hit job. Concerns were raised about how a man who had been found semi-conscious just a couple of weeks prior to his death could take his own life. Rudy Giuliani called it inconceivable that Epstein died that way, noting that he had been taken off suicide watch prior to his death. President Trump also fueled rumours when he shared a tweet from comedian Terrence Williams claiming Epstein had damaging information on Clinton, and despite the lack of evidence, it garnered over 55,000 shares. Although many questions remain unanswered, there is no solid evidence to suggest that Epstein's death was anything other than a suicide that should not have occurred and has deprived countless young girls of the justice they deserve for the abuse they suffered at Epstein's hands, and disturbingly it may also have allowed several important individuals to evade accountability. Jeffrey Epstein's case exposed systemic failures within the US legal system, particularly how wealth, privilege and personal connections can obstruct justice. His story also highlighted the global reach of human trafficking and the ways in which powerful individuals may be protected by murky institutions.